Good evening again. This is Sharia Crime Stoppers, and this is our weekly Tuesday night webinar series. We're very, very grateful to be able to continue this, and that's our intention. Every Tuesday night you'll find us here. Tonight we've got a very special program, what is really happening in mosques. I'm guessing that many of the people who have come forward to participate and attend this webinar and the people who will watch the podcast have always had a little bit of a confusion or worrisome feeling in the back of their minds about all these mosques. We have 3,200 of them. What really goes on in them? Well, tonight we're going to explore that. And we're very fortunate to have the reason for Sharia Crime Stoppers, our co-founder, David Boris, with us. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Dick, and good evening to all of our listeners and observers. It's a great honor to be back with you.
So when we say this is the reason for Sharia Crime Stoppers, some of you may know, but some may not. David Boris is a retired military officer and retired police chief. David, on his own, created a set of training, 16 hours of credit that's been given multiple times in multiple states with 1,500 police officers taking the training, getting credit, a full 16-hour credit on exactly the training that was removed by the federal government under Barack Obama in 2011 and 2012. That's why we have the program. Mary Warbicki is with us tonight on the controls, and Mary and I are students. We've taken the class, we've seen policemen get trained, and we're very, very anxious for more and more people who are in law enforcement in America to get to know David Boris in his class. In that class, David talks about mosques. David, why don't you take us through this comment about the Muslim Brotherhood's plan for America?
Yeah, although the undercover video you're going to see tonight was taken in the United Kingdom, I want you to look at this video as a template of what's transpiring in mosques all across our country, into Canada, throughout Europe, and Australia. And the way that I have focused the training to law enforcement officers is to emphasize how the Muslim Brotherhood views mosques. What is their plan for the use of mosques in the United States? And you can see from the quote on the screen, that's their words. The mosque constitutes the axis of their movement. It serves as a base for the rise to prepare us and supply our battalions. That's obviously a military term. In addition, at the absolute end of what they consider a mosque to be, they say it's also a niche of our prayers. Almost as an afterthought, it serves a religious purpose. So as you go through tonight's undercover video, keep that in mind, that we have, as Dick said, around 3,200 mosques, give or take, and counting, the majority of which are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, paid for thanks to Saudi Arabia, with funds provided by the Wahhabi sect of Islam, which is the state religion of Saudi Arabia. And so what you see going on in transpiring in the mosques in Great Britain could very easily be taking place here in the local mosque around the corner from your home. So keep that in mind, and I think we should start the undercover video.
Mary's getting that ready. We are going to have 3 segments tonight, just so you know. We're going to have a first video, about 20 minutes for you to watch. It's an undercover video. Pay careful attention. We're going to take a 10-minute break and have some questions and commentary. We have a part 2 and a part 3 as well. So I think we're getting ready to begin. Mary, whenever you're ready to push the button, we'll invite people to sit back and pay attention to the very first segment. There you have part 1. I'm sure that you have some new ideas perhaps than you had before. And we want to remind you that we are going to have these brief interludes, and we invite you to submit questions now and throughout the program. Again, remember there's a little button on the bottom as attendees. You can click on the Q&A, you type in your question. Mary or our victim will see them, and we will address them either in the intermissions or at the end as we have time. David, what comes to your mind in that first segment that you might want to reinforce or comment on?
Yeah, I am struck by the term of Wahhabism and how the announcer keeps talking about how this is an extreme version of Islam. There's nothing extreme about Wahhabism under Islamic law. I know our Western mindset considers a lot of what is said as extreme rhetoric, but Wahhabism is really a part of the Salafi movement that is bringing Islam back to its original roots. The original way that Islam was laid out by Muhammad and his immediate companions once they left Mecca for Medina in 622, and for the remainder of Muhammad's life when he died 10 years later. So Wahhabism is not an extreme version of Islam. It is an orthodox, fundamental version of Islam. Now, do all Muslims believe in this type of orthodoxy? No, they do not. I'll be the first to admit that, and I'm not going to claim that. In fact, many reject that. But what they're doing is they're rejecting the Islam laid out by Muhammad, which puts them at risk. And if you pay close attention to these imams, they say that very clearly, that Muslims who are not on board with this version, strict interpretation of Islam, need to be dealt with. And they can be even considered as apostates, Muslims in name only, takfirers, turncoats, if you will, and the punishment for these Muslims is death. It's a capital crime under Sharia law. So I just want to make that point clear. I see we do have some questions or comments. So Mary, why don't you take a look at those?
Yep, I just wanted to, there's one question from Magda, and she's asking, is the government aware of all of this in England?
Oh, I'm sure it is. This was broadcast, I believe, on the BBC. Excuse me?
2006 is when the video came out.
Yeah, so they'd have to be blind to it, just as much as our government is aware of what's going on in the mosque, and they're blind to it. So the short answer is absolutely, they're aware of it.
And we will find that there are people who have monitored the progression of this undercover process, what happened several years later. We'll have some news for you at the end of the show about ongoing investigations that we're going to follow. What struck me, David and Mary, was that I heard an awful lot of American accents. So these imams that were speaking to British people, some of whom have, even though they may be a Pakistani or somewhere from the British Empire or the Middle East, they speak British English. But the imams that I heard and listened to were definitely American. So the primary imam we heard was Abu Usama, and that accent was basically an accent that could have been anywhere in America. There was another imam who had an American. These are American imams in Europe who could be speaking at a mosque in my town or your town. And oh, by the way, if you can broadcast from Saudi Arabia live into the mosque in the UK, well, of course, that same broadcast would broadcast into America live into the mosque in America that are in the same network. So that struck me as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind where these imams, many of them are trained. They're trained in Saudi Arabia. So they're getting all the fundamentalist training, and that's their mission, is to take it out to the world, to transform the Dar el-Harb, the house of war, and that's what non-Muslim land is considered, and transform it into the Dar el-Islam, or the land governed by Sharia law. That's just fundamentalist Islam 101. It's nothing tricky about it. It's all laid out very clearly in the Quran, especially in those verses received after 622 in Medina. And I'm sure most viewers know about the doctrine of abrogation. All the peaceful verses are confined to Mecca when the Muslims were in a low number, weakened state. But it's when they increase the numbers through a variety of different ways, they gain political and military strength. That's when they start showing their true colors. And all of these imams are waving the green flag for Islam.
Well, what I heard in listening to this, again, I've never sat on a grand jury, and I certainly don't have any training in the justice system. But if I was listening to some of this evidence presented to people who were supposed to make determinations about do we have a case, is there probable cause, I heard words about not dealing with the law of the land, that the supreme law was Sharia, the Islamic supremacy laws, that they were the laws that these people were supposed to be moving forward to. So I heard indications of sedition. I also heard that even when they make progress and they move into a strong position where some of their laws, which has actually happened in the UK, as some of you know, we have 85 Sharia courts in the UK. But even still, even that progression through sedition to subvert and make Sharia the law of the land is only a first step. Jihad comes. Jihad comes eventually, no matter how long the semi-peaceful accommodations bring people forward to more and more saturation with Sharia. The step of jihad, the final violent step, is still there, and you heard it called for with some energy and enthusiasm. That's what struck me.
Yeah, what you're really referring to right now is jihad by the pen and tongue, which is certainly sheltered by our First Amendment, and it's democracies do a very poor job of defending the Constitution that creates them, and so ours is of course a republic, but nonetheless everything that you've heard tonight is protected speech. It's controversial, there's no question about it. It's pushing the envelope, as Dick suggests, getting very close to sedition, treason, if you will. But nonetheless, I did not detect anything in there that I could act on as a peace officer. And I will tell you later about some steps I think that we can take here if we hear this type of speech. So I'll just leave it at that. And I think we're probably getting close to our time that we need to take a look at part 2.
Yep. Guys, we're going to start part 2 on this.
Additional food for thought. David, any specific comments, or do you want to move right to the questions? We have a few.
Yeah, I think let's get to the questions. Some of them are quite good. Mary, if you would hit those and let's see where the truth lies.
Okay, I haven't had a chance to walk through them yet, but let's start with Tammy. I noticed much of what the one imam said is coming from the Quran. I listened to an imam in the U.S. state that dawah calling to Islam is jihad. Could you explain the different activities that are considered jihad?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Dawah is often identified or explained as proselytization, attempting to get people to convert to Islam, and indeed there certainly is that component to it. The way I describe it during the training of peace officers is every peace officer understands what it's like to get a summons from a local court. They are compelled to obey it, and there are consequences to a peace officer if they don't show up at the right time, at the right place in a court of law. They've been ordered to do it. And dawah to me is an order to us. It is our last chance to avoid the consequences of jihad. And remember, for Christians and Jews, what those consequences are. We are given the opportunity to either convert, submit, and live under Sharia law and pay a very onerous poll tax and under humiliation and be humiliated, or die. Those are the consequences that await us. And dawah is just a variety of different ways to Islamicize our culture, to get us to accept that Islam is benign, that it is in fact peaceful, and we have nothing to worry about it. And they're doing a great job at doing just that. So again, I say jihad of the pen and tongue. That is one aspect of jihad, that they are very clear through their writings and what they say to confuse us, to lie to us, to misrepresent what Islam is all about, anything to get us in a state of complacency and confusion. And that is a form of jihad before the first shot is even fired. So that's what we're facing at this point. And Mary, I think you have a couple of more that have
Yes,
some
sir.
good potential.
Yes, sir. Patty's asking, how difficult is it for law enforcement or detectives to go into a mosque in the U.S. and observe what is happening? Can they just walk into one of them?
Well, they can, unless the owners of the property object to it. Remember, a mosque is private property. The only way that we can go in there and insist upon going there if we have an official purpose. The problem is that there is only one reason why we would go there, and that is to see what's going on inside. And what they will claim is that we're being discriminatory, that we're treating Muslim houses of worship different than we treat Catholic cathedrals, the temples belonging to the Jews, and churches belonging to Protestants. We don't routinely visit these establishments unless we're going there to worship. Certainly not in an official capacity. So we would probably get a great deal of political pushback from the Council of American Islamic Relations, and we all know that's a front group for Hamas here in the United States, from the Southern Poverty Law Center, from the American Civil Liberty Group, maybe even for the ADL, for all I know. So that's the problem. It's the political noise that would create, and the pressure placed on a police chief or sheriff to have to come to answers publicly. Why are you doing this? Why are you singling out a Muslim house of worship when all they're trying to do is pray to their God? And we know how they will twist and turn and obfuscate, and before you know it, you got a lot of baggage to deal with. So that's the problem.
Okay, we've got one, and Donna is referencing Dave Gobbets, and we know Dave Gobbets has gone into many mosques. So Dave Gobbets investigated firsthand 14 Islamic centers and mosques in Connecticut, including 2 in Massachusetts. He ranked them low, medium, high, risk based on likelihood of violence advocated and likelihood of terror attacks in USA. 7 were high risk, 4 medium, 2 low. The Cambridge, Mass. Islamic Center, rated medium, was the one attended by the Zarniv brothers, and look what happened. He ranked the Manchester, New Hampshire Mosque as 9 out of 10 on jihad and 10 on Sharia compliance. Since these threats are a clear and present danger to America, what can we do with this information? Who can we give it to? Who will remove these blatantly treasonous centers committed to imposing their Sharia totalitarian political system? Otherwise, we just sit back and wait for more attacks and takeovers.
Every one of those mosques is being protected by locally elected political officials, non-Muslims, if you will, every one of them. I clearly understand what she's saying. I followed the case in New Hampshire closely, how the police chief, when presented with all of the information that David Gobbets uncovered, he just scoffed at it. He called Gobbets an Islamophobe. The local media came to the rescue of the mosque, as did the local public officials. And until we change that mindset, that's what we face at the local level. Now, one of the solutions to all of this is, once this type of information is obtained, we've got to publicize it. There's a certain degree of antiseptic to publicity, to the sunlight. And my personal feeling is that once this information becomes known, it needs to be made public. Now, when you have a local media, as in the case of New Hampshire, that sided with the Muslims, that attacked Gaubitz, that sided with the police chief not to do anything, it's very difficult. And I don't have a silver bullet other than education, informing people, just like all of the over 100 people that are on this webinar tonight. And hopefully you will have some ideas of things to look for if you do have a mosque, and listen for. But just remember, jihad of the tongue and pen. That's what you're seeing being played out by these firebrands, these imams in Great Britain who exist right here in this country.
Okay, we've got two more, but I know, Dick, I think you want to say something.
I just want to make sure people understand who Dave Gaubitz is. Dave Gaubitz is the author of Muslim Mafia. It's a book that you could get. It's over 10 years old. It was a blockbuster at the time. You may have heard of Chris Gaubitz. That's his son. He went undercover. Just wanted you to know that he's a published author. We know that he has a very, very careful checklist to evaluate mosques. We also know that he's been inside over 280 mosques. So that's who Dave Gaubitz is.
Okay, we're going to do these two, and then we need to get on to the third part. I see there's a couple of more questions. We'll get to those at the end. Let's do Brenda. We know that the Saudi Arabia has donated $614 million to U.S. universities since 2011. They are sanitizing Islam. Seems this should be illegal for foreign entities to do this, much like it is illegal for campaigns to take foreign money. How can we address this?
Well, until the alumni of these universities rise up and object to it, probably not much. Money talks. There's an awful lot of money going to elite colleges and universities, and many of the current crop of presidents of these universities and colleges have all signed letters of support for the Council of American Islamic Relations, are going to great lengths to obscure the sources of this money, because they know it's controversial. So these guys are clearly on the take. They know that where their bread is buttered, if you will, and until they're challenged from the people within, and I suspect that's going to have to be the alumni because they contribute too, then there isn't much that can be done, unless, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood is declared a terrorist organization, and then this money can be seized. But they have such a good way of laundering all of this cash to various obscure groups that in and of itself would be a financial nightmare, trying to trace it all back to a Muslim Brotherhood group or to Saudi Arabia. Remember, Saudi Arabia is our ally.
Yep.
And they're warming up to Israel now, and we don't want to do anything to disrupt that alliance. The Middle East has enough of its problems without us getting in the middle of another one.
Okay, let's do Amapolos, and then Dick, if you want to say something, we'll start the part 3. Why are pastors, priests, and rabbis not talking about this from the pulpit?
Well, my thought on that would be we have the enemies within the church, a series that we've done in the past. We're going to continue that. We'll have news at the end of the program. My own opinion is that many pastors, priests, and rabbis are in fact cowards that don't want to deal with the truth, that will take the easy way out. They have already lukewarmed their own faith, their own Old Testament or New Testament gospels have been watered down, and they are riding the wave of interfaith. So the answer is there's very, very few. Now, again, if you're interested in this topic, you're going to want to come back at the end and listen to the upcoming webinars we have specifically about pastors. The only comment I have from what we just saw, that section, I actually heard the one imam say that the Holocaust would never happen. It was a fake, and it was built up for the purpose of allowing the creation of Israel. So, I mean, to me, that was something that people may not have heard, but that to me, that was striking. The BS factor that we're hearing, particularly when there's explanations given, is really interesting. The BS factor is very high. It's related to taqiyya. It's part of the pen and the tongue. The tongue is great. 1,400 years of telling half-truths and BS it created an art form. These people are excellent at half-truths and lying, and that's what we're hearing.
You're absolutely
Okay.
right, Dick. And anytime a Muslim is in a minority status, they are obliged to protect Islam if they perceive Islam is under any kind of scrutiny or attack. And they can use sacred lying, taqiyya. They can spin or half-truths or kitman, or anything that is prohibited by Sharia law. They can practice as long as they're doing it to advance the cause. So there's all sorts of different deception that is in play here, and it's perfectly legal and authorized under Sharia.
Okay, guys, let's.
While we're waiting for David, I just want to make a comment. We hear all about Saudi Arabia on this tape, and this is great. Remember, this is 2006, etc. Since that time, of course, we've heard on this webinar series and just on our own reading, of course, the other powers. So it's not just Saudi Arabia that wants to make the foothold in America and around the world and be the surviving power of the caliphate. We've heard in webinars with Claire Lopez about the network of mosques that are paid for by Turkey. We know from Philippini in a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about the Deobandi coming out of Pakistan and their funding of these mosques. We know that the FGM doctor is part of a different group that's an Indian funded network. So we have competing networks in America with different ethnic backgrounds, all trying to spend money, all trying to make as powerful a footprint in America as they can. And of course, we have the Iranian paid for mosques that are very powerful, particularly I can say in the Midwest, there's an awful lot of very prominent Shia mosques, which are paid for by the government of Iran. So it's more than Saudi Arabia, but we certainly got an earful about Saudi Arabia tonight.
Well, you know, one of the things that I noticed throughout all three segments of it is that there were so many that sounded as if they were American citizens over there in the UK.
Yeah.
And so that sends a chill up my back, thinking, you know, these folks probably are back here now, doing exactly what they did over there.
Yep.
All right. David, any comments, any thoughts before we get into the questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments, but I would like to cover some of those questions that hung over from the second part and any new ones on part 3.
Right. Are you going to comment first or?
No, go ahead. Let's ask the questions first.
Okay, folks. We've got Lou. Will we ever be able to address the core beliefs of their prophet Muhammad behind the Islamic Jihad we see all over the world? If no Muhammad, there would be no Islamic Jihad. It's a good question.
Well, that's an excellent question. That has to be talked about. The core beliefs. That's exactly
Right.
what the public needs to know. That's what pastors, rabbis, our public officials, our university officials, that's exactly what we need to hear. And it's that is being censored from us purposely, not by the government any great extent, but by university officials because they're accepting money, by politicians who are accepting campaign finances from these folks, and because of political correctness. We're being labeled. Anyone who speaks out, everyone who attempts to speak the truth is going to be attacked brutally. It's not comfortable, especially when the media joins in. They never give you an opportunity to defend yourself. So this is a full court press to suppress the truth. But the whoever authored that particular question is 100% correct. We have got to figure out how can we get to the core doctrinal aspects of Islam.
Okay, we've got Mariana. Why not use a strategy of surveilling churches as well as mosques so that they cannot claim victim status, so they don't find anything threatening in a church, but at least this gives us justification for the action. Hopefully the cost is affordable.
Yeah, that's an excellent question that we need to explore, but let's take a look at this. We've got a whole generation of police officers who've been raised by political correctness and by multiculturalism, that all cultures are equal. They're saturated the ranks of police departments, and don't think for a moment that that type of strategy wouldn't become known very quickly, not only within the department, but I think that religious leaders would pick up on it very quickly, that that was just an excuse, a ruse, and you'd end up with a political nightmare on your hands if that ever became public. And it would. Eventually it would. I tell students all the time, there are certain strategies that we can incorporate to surveil mosques, but always have your press release ready, because somehow, some way, it is going to get publicized, and your local mayor, your local city council members, they're going to take all the political heat, and or the local sheriff for that matter, and whether or not they have the wherewithal to stand up to it, most of them, in my experience, don't want any part of it.
Okay, we've got John asking, what about the Johnson Amendment? Doesn't that get in the way of priests and rabbis speaking out about this?
I cannot comment on that. I do not know what's in that amendment, so I'm going to have to defer to Dick or.
Well, just briefly, I think we could handle this. The Johnson Amendment had to do with putting pressure on rabbis and priests to stay inside the church and not talk about political items or potentially losing their 501c3 status. So that had an impact. I think we're way past that now. We really have existential threats, and we basically should be challenging these ministers about their cowardice. They're counting on donations and tax-free status rather than trying to tell the truth.
Well, yeah, we've got pastors right now, we've got priests right now that are saying that we're all worshiping the same God.
Mm-hmm.
And until we get that mindset taken care of, we're not going to get anything out of priests, rabbis, or pastors. They've totally lost their one core mission, and that's to be shepherds for their flocks, to warn their flocks of when we're under attack and how to deal with it. If they're signing on that we're all worshiping the same God, we're not going to get any help from them whatsoever.
By the way, I think we had Robert Ibrahim on. That probably was a radio program. Mary, I think, picked up on the comment.
Yeah.
1,400 years. Islam has not changed, right, Mary? It's we who have changed.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If I could read a paragraph out of his book, Sword and Scimitar, Raymond Ibrahim, he sums it up quite well. He says, as Muhammad's civilization retreated into obscurity, the post-Christian West slowly came into being. Islam did not change, but the West did. Muslims still venerate their heritage and religion, which commands jihad against infidels, whereas the West has learned to despise its heritage and religion, causing it to become an unwitting ally of the jihad. Let me just add one short other paragraph he writes in here to summarize. In short, if Islam is terrorizing the West today, that is not because it can, but because the West allows it to. For no matter how diminished, a still swinging scimitar will always overcome a strong but sheathed sword. That just said a lot to me in terms of where we're at today.
Yeah, that's very good, Mary.
Yeah. We've got two more. Let me, since we were just talking about the Johnson Amendment, Donna's asking, she thought Trump did an executive order ending the Johnson Amendment. Do we know on that?
I don't think we know, but I also don't think we see any change in behavior. I mean, even if it's on the books or not on the books, the training is there. The people coming out of seminaries have made their choice, and we basically have many people who could speak out and tell the truth absolutely not doing it. So we have a massive problem with the clergy.
And we've covered some of that in some of our previous webinars and even some that are coming.
Yeah.
Elizabeth is our last question. I heard they have a plan here to get 500 more Muslims elected in different offices in the USA. How can we work at making sure they do not win and basically take over our country through our judicial system? If I could comment real quick, and then I'll let the two of you speak out about it, is that there's an article that Dr. Stephen Kirby wrote about looking at it from the perspective of what these candidates should be asked.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would reference everybody to go out to the United West Sharia Crime Stoppers page to look at that. It's an article that references the Constitution and questions you can ask these candidates and to specifically get them to answer.
Well, the only thing that I would want to say to her in that question is Dick Manasari did a brilliant job along with his band of concerned citizens in Michigan last year of defeating a Muslim candidate for governor, making sure that he did not get into office. And it's that type of full court press that's going to be needed at the local level. Anytime one of these Muslims try to get into office, we've got to defeat them politically. So Dick wrote the book on it. Hopefully he can publish something on it for us, but it's all there. He did it. It was a success and he should be applauded for it, but that is exactly what it's going to take.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, David. Just a quick comment on that. We had wonderful support from Tom Trento and Laura Loomer to do that, but I do want to make the comment. What simply we did, we put out vetting questions. We also put out a pledge. We had a Republican candidate who would actually address Sharia in his campaign. He tried to draw the Abdul candidate into a conversation, and if you listen carefully to the comments tonight and on our radio program last week, it's about the volcanic iceberg. The Sharia, the Islamic supremacist candidates, they want to talk about the Bernie Sanders. They don't want to talk about Sharia. When you force them to talk about Sharia, the volcano erupts, and it happened last time when Patrick Colbeck made some comments and tried to talk about Sharia. The Sharia-compliant Islamic supremacist candidate specifically said, lost his cool and said, "You may not hate Muslims, but all Muslims hate you." And he was speaking specifically to a Christian man who was a candidate for governor who simply asked about Sharia. So thank you for the comment, David.
Dick, you're being way too modest. Mary, what else you got for us?
That's the last of the questions. I think we're ready to close it out.
Yep, go ahead, Dick.
All right, well, let's, we're gonna go do a little bit of sharing and then we'll get through this. We appreciate your participation with us. All right, we're going to share some PowerPoint just to remind you of what we've been talking about. We've heard some people talk about wanting you to follow them. We have had very aggressive moves that say that we want everybody to convert. We want to dismantle these countries that the Muslims are saying that they're living in. They want to take over. And so here's a way for us to remember that. I want you to convert to Islam or my followers will kill you. Okay, well, we know that there are training through the mosque, through these networks, on exactly how to cause jihad. We also know that there's a kind of a logic that these people are talking about. This meme just seemed to say it. On the one hand, we are aggressively criticized with hate crime groups, etc. If we comment or are critical, like we are tonight, about Islam. On the other hand, Islam is not offended by this type of behavior, pedophilia, beheading, FGM, etc., and they have their allies who are also not offended. We heard conversations justifying child marriage. This is just a reminder that child marriage is defended inside the mosque, and okay, those people live in our neighborhoods, and there are children in our neighborhoods who we may think are children who may be married. The other comment is there are these networks of mosques in America. The very famous FGM case in Michigan was from the Dawood Bohra sect of Islam out of India. 20 mosques are under that network, they're controlled. The main imam in India doubled down on FGM. FGM is mandatory in the United States, and each one of these mosques has a way to get to the cutter doctor, like the lady in Michigan. The point of this simply is, yes, these things are happening, and yes, they're being dictated out of the mosques. This is where the guidance comes from. Remembering, if you think a priest is powerful, the imam is all powerful, because the imam actually gives rulings and judges and obtains fatwas, and can cause actions to be taken we consider as murder. They consider some regaining honor and honor killing. As we have in the past on our webinars, we like to focus on action items. We like for you to emphasize good and evil. We're not looking for weak conversation. So we're really asking you, as members of the one team, to continue your attendance at these webinars, get more people to them, and begin to speak boldly about what we're talking about. Our friend David Boris has talked about vetting your local mosque. So an action item for you to consider. We're not inviting you to go into a mosque or put yourself in any danger, but you certainly can go online from your office at home, and you can look up a mosque. Look at your local mosque online. They put a lot of information out there. Research your local mosque from their websites. Who is the resident imam? Do they have visiting speakers coming in? Or do any of them have associations, for example, with CARE, which, as you know, is a mosque? And oh, by the way, lots of information in the newsletter. When you look, you can also look at federal tax records. They're called 990 reports. You can see who the owner of the mosque is. If the owner of the mosque is the North American Islamic Trust, they own about 80% of the mosque. They are the franchise banking organization that funnels the money from countries in the Middle East to put mosques up. These mosques cost between $5 and $10 million. So you can find out what network, who owns the mosque, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, what. You can also identify, is the mosque part of a network? Is it a Sunni mosque? Is it Shia? If it's a Shia mosque, it's associated with Iran. Darul Uloom was mentioned in the videos. We know that our friend Philip Haney has spoken at length about the Deobandi Darul Uloom mosques. Sri Lanka was connected to the Deobandi, which was also connected to San Bernardino, which was connected to Orlando. So learning about a mosque. And then, of course, we've got the FGM focused organization called the Darul Bora. If you come up with something you think is interesting, intriguing, maybe even scary, and you want to share an incident about some research you've done on a mosque, please contact us. David Boris, in particular, would be very interested in getting those incident reports. Our email address is spearpoint911@ShariaCrimeStoppers.org. All right, what's coming up now? We are very, very grateful for the opportunity to continue to deliver these webinars. We hope you will get more people to pay attention with them, invite them to look at the podcast. Well, guess what? We're going to do more mosques. So on July the 9th, we're going to have a second topic on mosques, undercover mosques. Why? Because we have access to reports in America. We have access to more film inside of mosque. And given the energy that's been generated with tonight's program, we're going to extend. This is not a repeat. This is new information. So invite your colleagues to come on July the 9th on a Tuesday night and watch the next episode. Okay, here we go. We're going to move on. We have a radio program every Friday night. This particular Friday night, we'd like you to come because we have our very first guest, who is a U.S. congressman. His name is Scott Perry. That's my mistake. Excuse me, I apologize to the congressman. It is Scott Perry. That's my mistake. Congressman Scott Perry will correct that, and child abuse attorney Liz Yor will be with us Friday night, and we're going to talk about FGM, brave enough to stand against FGM. The congressman has done unique work in all of the Congress, and you're going to want to get to know. Again, my apologies. It's Congressman Scott Perry, P-E-R-R-Y. We will fix that.
Go, Dick.
David, how are you? Let's see here. We're going to get out of the, here we go. We're continuing. All right, we have a Tuesday. It's called the 11th. It's next week. Oh my goodness, we're going to talk about the enemies within the church again. Liz Yor will be back with Cliff Kincaid and Michael Hitchborn, all Catholics, all concerned about the Catholic Church, the enemies within the Catholic Church, specifically the investment that Pope Francis makes into anti-American activities, like putting money into the caravans that are coming up from Central America. So we have an entire program for everyone to participate, not just for Catholics, but there will be specific actions for Catholics to take, and that's next week. The following week, we have another enemy within the church. This will be the evangelicals working with our Jewish friends. So we have evangelicals who are supporting Jews and Israel. The organization is called Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. Lori Cardozo-Moore is the National Director of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. She will be with us in the webinar. Michael Goldstein is the legal counsel for the national organization, and he's the director of the Ohio chapter. This is very important. If you remember our webinar on the enemies within, we had a person, her name was Bev Goldstein. She actually said that there are Jews who are walking away from their synagogues and their rabbis, and they're basically isolated. Here we find evangelicals who are working with Jews and supporting Israel. So that should be really interesting. We're not done. We've got another webinar coming on July the 7th. This is another continuation. We heard about Saudi Arabia spending money on mosques. Turkey spends money, Pakistan, Iran. By the way, we're going to have an entire program on the little country of Qatar. We're going to show a documentary called Blood Money. J. Michael Waller from the Center for Security Policy will be our guest. You'll see the entire webinar, and you'll be able to pick up on the conversation with J. Michael Waller. By the way, in tonight's webinar, it was mentioned that universities are accepting, I think it was $600 million. Well, guess what? We're specifically going to have talk on July 7th about specific universities who take great amounts of money. They put their campuses in Qatar, and one of them is Georgetown University. David made a comment, and I guess we'll start speaking right now. If you went to Georgetown University, don't miss this program. And if you're an alumni of Georgetown University, you've got a lot of work to do to try to correct Georgetown's embrace of the Muslim Brotherhood, and specifically Saudi Arabia. $25 million is given to Georgetown University. Finally, we have the chairman of the board of the United West, that would be Tom Trento, on June 18th. So we've got the 11th, 18th, etc., ongoing Tuesdays. If you signed up for one of the webinars, you're signed up for all of them. The chairman of the board is in Israel, and he is the reason that we're part of the United West, or Sharia Crime Stoppers. Again, if you think what we're doing is relevant to you and the future of America, then please consider a donation to the United West. I believe we are done. David or Mary, any other comments?
No, well done.
All right, we're going to keep doing this. We appreciate, send us your comments. If you have any comments on ideas for radio or webinar programs, if you see an interesting video that you'd like to share with us, again, Spirit 911 at ShariaCrimeStoppers.org is the way we communicate with you. So again, thank you so much. See you Friday night on the radio, and back here next Tuesday night on another episode of the Sharia Crime Stoppers webinar.